Let's Talk JMMA with Charlie Jewett from sogo-kaku.com. This is a podcast about the deep end of the Japanese combat sports scene. I'm your host, Shibatar from On the Road Management. Now, let's begin. Happy New Year, Charlie.
Happy New Year and happy birthday to you, Shu.
Thank you. And Happy New Year to all of our listeners. This is our first episode of 2022.
Yes.
And I guess I'm assuming you were at the Saitam Super Arena on December 31st, right?
I was. I was there with 22,500 people, and it's been a while since I've been to the arena with that many people, and you forget how crowded the hallways get.
But that's great, though, that, in the time of pandemic, when the Japanese government is super sensitive, right, about everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think
it was definitely nice. It's got to be the biggest, off the top of my head, it has to be the biggest event they've had since the pandemic era started.
Yeah. Anyway,
I think even Sakakibara mentioned in a comment that with Omicron, then they might have to go back to start limited seating again. So I think he was kind of happy to squeeze this in before restrictions might get raised again.
I can't believe Japanese governments are doing that. I mean, I'm looking at the Japanese news from the States, and even news spends way too much time talking about pandemics and Omicron, all kinds of stuff. I mean, that shouldn't be more than 10 seconds. You know what I mean?
Well, especially since Japan has such low cases. It's like 39 people a day. It's like,
yeah, exactly. I can't believe some city hall are holding a press conference for finding 2 people who is infected, right? The Omicron and stuff. But anyway, so let's talk MMA and let's talk about this then. Shibata Kubo controversy. I think
starting off with the elephant in the room.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, all right. So let's review what happened. What happened was Kubo's wife's brother, which is Kubo's, I guess, brother-in-law, revealed that Shibata and Kubo had some communication prior to the fight.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And what is it? Is this? And I guess in this communication between the line, which is like a WhatsApp in Asia, I guess Shibata asked Kubo to go easy on the first round, no hitting face, right? Just kicking.
Right.
Yeah.
So through a series of tweets that may or may not be connected in those messages, it looks like they had agreed to kind of take it easy during the first round.
Okay.
I think some of the messages, Kubo even has already spoken about it on a podcast. I think that the agreement was no punches to the face in the first round.
Yeah.
Let's just do body and low kicks, make it fun and exciting, and then let's just really go for it in the second round. Which it makes sense because I imagine they were trying to get as much time on Fuji TV as possible.
Right.
Because they're both trying to promote their YouTube channels. And rumors started, I think the biggest one was his brother-in-law kind of releasing those screenshots.
Right.
Then there's a sponsor for the match who was like a dental clinic, who was one of Kubo's sponsors, who since deleted them, but had tweets like, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys fight 2 rounds tomorrow and stuff like that. And then after the fight, seemed kind of upset that it didn't go 2 rounds. Because I think that they thought that they were going to have their sponsorship on TV for longer, might be the deal. And now Kubo's essentially, if it is his audio on that podcast, which I believe it is, he's essentially confirmed that the idea was, we're just going to take it easy, have a feeling out first round, have some fun, which kind of makes sense now why Shibatar was able to fall for his knees and beg for him not to hurt him.
He did the pro wrestling gig,
right, without Kubo kicking his head off in the opening round.
Right, he could have done that because he could suck a kick to the head, right?
Yeah, exactly. Also, it makes sense that why Kubo was so surprised by the stoppage, because I think his idea was, we're just going to make it look fun for the first round. And then the fight got stopped, which is why he seemed genuinely confused after the end of the fight. I thought he was confused because he was saying he didn't tap, which he didn't, his second through the Talon, which may also think that Miyata didn't know about this agreement. and saw a guy that outweighed his fighter by 30 pounds wrenching an armbar and was like, I'm not going to let Kubo get his arm destroyed. So,
on top of that, I did actually watch the YouTube by some ex-businessman who is Kubo's friend, and they were talking on the cell phone, and it was Kubo explaining that the Shibata even actually explained to Kubo that if he gets hit in the head, it might cause him some damage. So that he wants Kubo to go easy and blah blah blah. But the very interesting thing is this: Kubo also explained that he had another fight confirmed like about a week before this Rizin show, but it fell through.
really,
Now this was a second opportunity, and he didn't want to say no because, according to Kubo, that he arranged all these other people to walk in with him and walk out, and Sarah, his wife, has all this costume and singing gig set and everything else. So, and he also wanted to fight, so he accepted it without even really discussing full details.
right?
And that's so Japanese MMA because I warn this to all my clients, but sometimes even my clients, they accept a fight without checking how much they're getting paid.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing, right? It's in America, it's common, or anywhere in the world. When you
That'd be the first question that anybody asks.
right, and any offer you get, they'll tell you how much, right? They're willing to pay. What's the fee? Blah blah blah. Purse, show money, win bonus, whatever, right? But in Japanese MMA, it's actually very common for a matchmaker or promoter to contact the fighter and ask, "Hey, are you willing to fight for this guy on this date on this show?" And if you ask, "Oh, how much?" most of the time, these type of promoters will tell you, "Well, I want to check with you that if you're willing to fight this guy first."
Yeah.
So the majority of fighters say, "Oh, yes, I'm willing to," and they will consider that as accepting a fight. But that's not really the way to go, right?
Right. Well, it reminds me of wasn't there an old Bob Sapp controversy where they didn't even want to let him sign the contract till after the fight?
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of reminds me of some stuff that's happened in the past.
Exactly. And one way to actually look at it is like in the Japanese community, like in the business, it's not like that with all the top businesses, obviously, but the majority of a business still see contract as just the formality.
Right.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people believe that even though you sign the contract, you think you can revise it later, and that's something it's very common. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
And it is interesting, and a lot of contract I see from sponsors from Japan, there are a few clauses that it's just not possible. Like for example, they're asking you to put this logo on shorts, but you can't do that if you go to UFC, obviously, right? So I will ask, "Oh, can you put a clause in and say, but except UFC?" Now, majority of sponsors reply to me as saying this, "Well, but Shu, all the other athletes signed the same contract, including blah, 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 who has fought in UFC. So they didn't honor this one line, but they didn't care because it's only for formality." You know what I mean? So for me to ask to put this extra line says except UFC, sometimes they took it as a rude. So it's a different culture.
Is that kind of like, I remember back when one of the things that the UFC was upset about when they purchased Pride was that a bunch of the contracts with the fighters had expired like significantly before they purchased them. Is this one of the reasons why? It's just like a
I
formality?
wouldn't be surprised, actually. I wouldn't be surprised because let me tell you that this very famous episode, I can't tell you who, but one of the very popular Pride fighter got on this very popular variety show in Japan. And he was so excited when he got an offer, so he said yes. I forgot to ask how much he's getting paid. And he got on the show, he went through the taping, he forgot to ask how much he's getting paid. So he asked his manager, "Hey, how much am I getting paid?" So manager finally calls the production company and says, "So by the way, how much was his fee for making this national appearance on prime television, like the big time spot?" And the answer was, "How much do you want?" So it's actually a common, even in the entertainment world.
That'd never fly, I feel like, stateside.
Oh, never in the States. Right. Anyway, so go back to Kubo and Shibata. So Kubo said he accepted a fight without really going through, discussions in detail, blah, blah, blah. And so it's very common. And he says he got this, all of a sudden he got a message through Instagram from Shibata himself. that's when he started to discussing. I don't know when this discussing stage has switched to the line, but he said that he started to discussing on Instagram direct messages, and he thought the first, Shibata was playing with him,
Yeah.
but yeah, Shibata said he's willing to put this in writing and sign, stamp everything.
I think Kubo even said he's going to release his own YouTube video that has like audio recordings or something.
Exactly. He taped the recording. I mean, he recorded it, right? The entire conversation. So, I mean, what do you think? I mean, I guess I'm 54 years old, so I'm not in their generations, but it seems like in the younger generation, they like to go directly to the public immediately through social network. But
Right.
way I
So,
see it, sometimes some of the things would be much better if you plan it out. You could use that as a negotiations and all kinds of stuff.
well, I guess you have to start with the basic thought of like, what is Kubo's end goal? Like, what does he think complaining about all of this publicly is going to get him? Because if anything, my immediate reaction is it's just going to piss Rising off and make Rising not interested in having him fight for them in the future.
I think that's a normal thinking, right, from our Westerners' point of view. But I think in the Japanese MMA world, who has this little vague line between pro wrestling and MMA, and also the fact, I guess, YouTuber has this privilege that anything goes.
Well, it's not that they had the agreement that I think he's going to piss Rising off. I think that he's blasting about it all over social media.
Oh, I know.
That's what's going to piss them off, is what I was more getting at.
Mm-hmm. But
that he's bringing a bunch of attention to it.
Shibata blasted Sakibara and Rising for being a bad businessman, and there's slow negotiations and blah 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 prior to fight too, right? And yeah.
But I think Shibatar is kind of in a different position because he's kind of in a position of power, and that coming off of last year's New Year's Eve, where he, without question, had the most watched and popular fight on that card.
Exactly.
I think Rising, he knows that Rising is continually in a ratings war.
You're
on
right.
New Year's Eve, and they needed him more than the other way around.
Exactly, because they could actually price Shibata in a correct way when they negotiate with Fuji Television for the license fee, right? Because I guess on the TV ratings, they decide everything on that. So if 7% was a score by Shibata's fight the highest, it's just compared to the other station, that's how much you get paid. And he even said publicly he will only fight next year if he gets $1 million. I mean,
Well, yeah, because I mean, it's crazy because his first fight I think has over 7 million views on YouTube. It's like clearly one of the most watched fights in Rising's history.
Right.
And they were trying to pay him like $50,000 or something.
I think they offered him like 20, and ended up being 50, where he thought that that's his value on the market. I don't know if he gets that standard value, but I think that's how he felt. But now he feels, and he also said that Rising mentioned that there may be a possibility he may be to fight Jake Paul. So that's the reason he stayed with the organization. Stayed meaning, quote unquote, stayed meaning,
But he also, I think, he recently said, in the post fight, that he's not interested in fighting Jake Paul anymore. I mean, who knows? He's a YouTuber pro wrestler that's going to say a bunch of crazy stuff. But he's no longer interested in that fight because now I think he thinks that Jake Paul will just hurt him. So, I think he said Jake Paul's gotten too strong for him. So, but I mean, he'll change his tune if the money gets offered, I imagine.
Now, this is, I think, I have this question. I could see why fighters like Ben Askren and Woodley took a fight against Jake, even though they're significantly smaller. And it's not like they're seasoned boxers. You know what I mean? That's because they were getting millions of dollars. So my question here is, how much is Kubo getting paid here?
My initial thought is, I mean, if Shibatar's getting paid, if Shibatar had to fight to get 50, I don't think Kubo's getting paid that much at all. I think he sees it as an opportunity to promote him and his wife's YouTube channel on national television, and for his wife's somewhat obsession with starting a music career.
Right. Yeah. You know what? But that's a mentality of this is my opinion, but it's a mentality of a unknown comedian who wants to crack into the Fuji Television's big variety show. They will take the gig for free. You know what I mean? Because they're willing to go, and after that, they'll get a spotlight, so they'll make good money after that. I'm not sure if that's the Kubo's right way because he's a K1 champion. I'm telling you, he's more than a legit kickboxer. He's one of the best. You know,
and people know him,
right?
Yeah.
So the fact
also, I mean, his wife comes from a very wealthy family, so it's not as if they're doing this to get rich. I think it's more that they're trying to build up their. I think he's trying to build up like a post-fight career of being a comedian or being like some sort of YouTube gimmick act with his wife, and this is all them trying to get free publicity essentially.
I get that. I get the whole concept, but still, it's a huge spot on New Year's Eve. This is when, like, I mean, it's almost like this is, I think, Mr. Shin Aoki said in the Japanese MMA, it's all about New Year's Eve. Everybody is trying to fight that show, except those guys who wants to go to UFC and blah blah blah. But so this is it. This is the biggest stage. So
yeah, I mean, it's literally like the Super Bowl of MMA for
exactly. So why not demand the money? Because and especially when if really his other fight fell through a week before the show, you know, and the Rizin came up with this offer. And it's so funny in my mentality, or majority of probably American mentality, on that situation, you ask for more money, right? Because this is like short notice. And fight fell through. It's not my fault. But in the Japanese mentality, it's the other way around. You're supposed to feel appreciated. The promoter worked so hard to find another opponent, although the guy is 20 kilo over.
Yeah.
I mean, really, if I were his manager, I would never take that fight. Never.
No. Well, I think the only saving grace is it's not a real MMA fight, right? It's like a customs rules crazy thing.
Right. Right. So now, do you think? I mean, what do you think? I mean, I even saw Shibata even posted a video and saying that communication online is fake, and but he said even though it's true that Kubo had no obligation to honor the agreement because nothing signed, everything else. So he had every right to go for the fucking finish from the. I'm sorry for the French. Every, moment of the first round. Even though they supposedly promised to not go for the head.
Yeah. So I mean, the more it's just we don't know enough information yet. The more pessimistic or like paranoid side of me is saying like, oh, they're just trying to get even more attention by talking about all this stuff now and trying to get more YouTube views because they're each going to make videos talking about it and generate a bunch of attention about their fight after it happened. But then,
yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
there's also the possibility that, there was this agreement and now Shibatar is just denying it, which seems like it'd be a stupid move if Kubo has the receipts that he says he has. Or Kubo is just not that smart either. Like, I don't know what's going on.
Well, I don't know if the Kubo knew that his brother-in-law had intention to reveal that to the public to begin with, but the whole thing, they should have planned well, right?
Well, how did the brother-in-law get the screenshots? I'm like,
exactly,
there's so many questions I have.
He had to know, right? But of course, the whole thing had to be planned better.
Right.
They could have used that in negotiation.
I would also like to say that, like, it shouldn't be blown out of proportion. It doesn't seem like this was like pro wrestling match fixing. It seems like it was just, let's just wait. Let's just take it easy in the first round and really go at it in the second round. It seems like more like a gentleman's agreement,
right?
To get as much time on Fuji TV as possible. And that potentially Shibatar just said, screw that. I'm going to sucker punch you and then go for a flying armbar.
Right. So it wasn't really fixed, right? Quote unquote. Right. And also in the Japanese pro wrestling world, you know that even though it was supposed to be a show, there were more than a few cases that he went to the real shoot fighting too. So I guess
isn't that how that famous pro wrestler was murdered by a Yakuza?
Rikidozan?
Yeah, the guy that fought Rikidozan when he fought Kitamura.
Kimura, the judo guy who tapped out Horion Gracie.
Right. He made it a real fight without telling Kimura, and then
the
Yakuza guy like pee on a knife and stab him, and he died of an infection.
Well, actually, the person who stabbed Rikidozan, I personally saw him. I'm not going to say I met him, but I saw him because he was actually pretty famous at the later end of his career. It's not career, after he came back, retired from Yakuza world. He was pretty famous for walking this little dog every morning with his mistress on this little park in Roppongi. I heard
Was he
that
just famous
rumors.
for being the guy that killed Rikidozan?
Yeah, exactly. And I even know the details. What I heard was that. Do you know the details? What happened was that Rikidozan went to the restroom and came back, and they kind of bumped into each other. And Rikidozan started to beat the shit out of him. So he was on the bottom, and he stacked a knife to Rikidozan's stomach, right? And what happened was Rikidozan got stabbed and got up on the stage because there was a stage there on New Latin Quarter. It's the club. He got up on the stage, grabbed the microphone, announced to everybody he got stabbed. Then his entourage took him to the gym instead of taking him to the hospital.
From what I understand, it's not the stab that necessarily killed him. It's he died of an infection that resulted from the stab.
Exactly. He drank water when he's not supposed to be, is what I heard. I'm not sure because I was there, you know?
Okay, because I had heard that the guy had like gone out of his way to make the blade as dirty as possible. So that if he stabbed someone, they would get an infection.
I don't think it was even planned. It was an accident. Right. I heard. Because I'm telling this right now. Like, do you ever read the book called Tokyo Underground by Robert Whiting?
No, I have not.
You should pick that book up. It's a story about this Italian guy who made the very first pizzeria in Roppongi.
Oh, interesting.
And it's a story about the guys who came through these restaurants and like mobsters, stars.
Yeah, because Roppongi has a very like nightlife / Yakuza image. When I think about it,
especially back then after the 50s. So what happens was this guy, one of the guy who came to this restaurant was Rikidozan, and this whole chapter was spent on how Rikidozan was heavily connected with the Yakuza. He even had this secret casino going on in his big house, and he had the doorbell man and the shotgun guy with a shotgun guarding, this casino place and all kinds of stuff. So big time.
For those that are unaware, Rikidozan is still super famous. Like,
yes,
most people have heard of Rikidozan even decades after his death.
Exactly, in Japan, very, very famous. And just so you know, this Tokyo Underground, actually, I think Scorsese has a right to the film.
Oh,
right.
That'd be interesting. The Italian perspective of Tokyo.
Exactly. I wish Scorsese makes this movie. I don't know. I think he bought the rights like even 20 years ago. So I don't know what happened.
Well, it would be his first movie about Italians in Japan. So.
Oh yeah, exactly. But when you talk about Italian mafia, who makes better movie than Scorsese, right? I mean,
no one. I mean, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, exactly. So it's just this Kubo deal. I think it's sad in a way from my point of view that now everybody's talking about this instead of what happened in Rizin 33, right. Where it was night of upsets, right?
Well, especially if they both release YouTube videos, this is just going to dominate the Japanese coverage of the event. This is going to dominate it,
right?
And so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah.
Plus, it seems to go directly in the face. I mean, I hated the press conference where they announced one of the fights where Sakakibara gave us like a 45-minute lecture on why you shouldn't go to SNS and talk about things in public.
Oh, yeah.
When he was talking about the Koji Shibatar fight, I was like, I get it. Announce the fights. You don't need to talk about this for 45 minutes. But I feel like we're just going to get another one of those now.
Right. In general, like how like Connor and all these guys are doing, like trash talking at the press conference or through, Twitter and stuff like that. But I think these guys are much smarter the way they use it because they do only use that for quote unquote trash talk. But the real deals and real demands are happening and behind the doors. You know what I mean? Behind the scenes. That's what the Japanese fighters need to learn is how I feel. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, if you're going to do stuff like this, you don't want the other guy to have evidence that it happened.
Right.
Especially if you're going to screw him over.
Yeah, exactly. And if that's the, like a ace in the hole for you, you might want to keep it, right? To the end. I don't know why they want to just go for it. It's like a die hard kind of thing.
Well, I mean, if you're Kubo and you're trying to build your YouTube channel, you could have milked this.
Oh, I know.
For so many views, if you just like hinted at it in videos and talked about how you're going to release it in a later video or something. But
Now I see that Jamie is saying that apparently Kubo versus Hiroya was planned for this show.
Is that why Hiroya was in Shibatar's corner?
No, I don't know.
Wait. Oh,
Hiroya.
was it supposed to be Hiroya's? I mean, Hiroya was in Shibatar's corner.
I'm sorry,
So
Hiroya versus Kubo. Right? Did I say Shiba? Yeah. But
So
point
was
is,
Hiroya, I think there
Hiroya
was
was injured.
supposed to be a Hiroya retirement event,
He's supposed to be,
but
right? Supposed
Hiroya was injured.
right.
So that might have been what was supposed to happen. That would make sense because they're both former K1 fighters.
That makes sense, and I think it also makes sense that maybe he made a decision to pull out very last minute because even though he knew injured, if he feels that he needed to do this retirement fight, so he tried to heal it till the very last minute, but he couldn't, kind of stuff. Actually, happens a lot in the Japanese MMA. So I guess that happens, maybe, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting, right? So, but anyway, so let's talk about the other fight because
Yes,
I think we had the great thing happen in the Rising 33. Let's talk about Ougikubo winning. I mean,
yes.
hats off to that guy, right? I mean,
after the first round,
mhm.
I thought Ougikubo was screwed because in the
I mean, the first round of the semifinal,
right? No, after the first round of the night. So after
no,
his
it's the
Inoue fight, I
semifinal.
thought
Okay, yeah, okay,
when he was going into the finals, I thought he was screwed because he
okay.
took a lot of damage from Naoki in the opening round. Now, people forget because the event was so long, but I mean, he was beating up his leg, and it was actually low kicked him, and he fell down at one point.
Yeah, okay.
And was hitting him with hard punches. I mean, he had marks on his face, and
Right.
relative to that, I thought Kai took almost no damage in the Takizawa fight and exerted very little effort in it. So I thought that it would favor Kai just because of the tournament format, but Ougikubo just showed how tough he was and really just, I mean, especially in the Naoki fight, showed how tough he was. But in the Kai fight, he surprised everybody by actually outstriking Kai, which seemed very confusing to me. And the crowd, at least at the arena, they liked Ougikubo. I mean, he was getting probably louder applause than Kai, especially after the fight when he got engaged.
Remember the comment Ougikubo made on the press conference? Like he said that for the past 5-6 years or so, since he couldn't make it to the UFC after the tough, not even a single day he felt happy from the bottom of his heart. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I mean, he had the whole audience behind him. I think.
Well, it's just it's a testament of how good Rising is doing at, especially Sato at building the stories. Because you take a guy, and through the Rising Confession and the VTRs, they've created this underdog story that everyone's behind, and they all just love him. And I mean, he earned it. Props to him. He wasn't my favorite to win the tournament. I wouldn't have put him in the top two, maybe third. I put about maybe my third most likely to win, and he blew everyone away.
Well, here's what it is. According to the information I have, apparently that Ougikubo told, one of the person I know that when he was getting attacked on the first round, he thought that Naoki was really rushing, was going for full force, too much from the beginning, that he knew that if he wait around that he's going to run out of gas. It's a veteran thinking. He was able to weather the storm, right?
Well, I think even before the fight, he was saying that he had questions about Naoki's grappling defense and his stamina.
Right. Takedown defense and cardio, right? Basically, right.
Because I think he cited the one fight in Rising, I forget who it was, where Naoki fought an American guy.
Trent. One side, no. I think he questioned about Trent Gordon fight. No.
Right. That was the fight where he
third round that he gassed out. Right.
Yeah, because he said in that fight he saw some holes in Naoki's game that he thought he could take advantage of.
Right.
Which it looks like he did.
Right. Here's what it is. I'm Naoki's manager, of course, so I no excuse from the loser. You should never make excuses. Period. However, on last night's podcast on the Dropkick, cornerman, Naoki's cornerman, Mr. Mizugaki, has revealed that Naoki's finger got dislocated in the first round. So after the first round came to in the corner, the first word he says, "Oh, it's dislocated." So from that moment on, things were a little off. But also, he felt, and also I agree with him. And from the very beginning, I think Naoki was rushing. and he lacked that calmness that he always needed. He always had, and even though he was good at these steps, he was only going forward. There was no side steps at all, almost no side step at all. So bad game plan, bad decision making at the certain point of the fight. So dislocation of the finger really only a small factor,
Yeah, can you talk? I know you know a little more. Can you talk about like the future for Naoki now?
But before that, I'm going to talk
sorry.
about Ougikubo once too. I'm not going to reveal, but I knew that Ougikubo was not also 100%.
Right.
Like any other veterans, you always have a problem here and there.
Well, I mean, I think this event, more than most Rising events, was filled with fighters that were compromised physically.
Oh yeah.
There were a ton of fighters on this event who were injured, and that might just be because Rising, I mean, aside from just tough training, Rising puts so many events on back to back near the end of the year that a lot of these fighters had like a 1 month turnaround from pretty tough fights a month ago.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, that's it. But for Grand Prix, it's everybody's in the same condition. We knew this is what we have to go through, so no excuses. We all knew that you have to fight twice in one night, and I know that I heard that Mr. Ougikubo wasn't perfect in shape till maybe a few weeks before the fight. So, and same for probably the other fighters. So in that situation, Ougikubo still grinded out, went 2 wins. I mean, gotta give this guy a big credit. I hope. This is going to be the late end of his career soon, right? I mean, he's like making a last run to make.
Before I forget, have you heard about now? Everyone in Rising is talking about the various curses in Rising. The most prevalent being that if they put only one person on a poster, that person loses. But have you heard about the new curse? Is that every fighter in the tournament that had a prepared video? I think the videos are called prepared. Every fighter that had a prepared video made about them lost.
Oh, preparation, right?
Every preparation video feature fighter lost.
Well, yeah, except Naoki. When he made that, he didn't lose that next fight.
I think they meant in the tournament in general.
Yeah, in the tournament. Oh, yeah.
Of course, essentially saying Ougikubo is one of the only fighters that didn't have one made about him.
But what a story, right? I wished Fuji Television and Rising will utilize this to make him and his wife very famous. I want him to make good money.
It's a perfect story because his story has everything. I mean, when he failed to get in the UFC, his wife left him. She took the kids.
Oh, I know.
And that had to be tough. And then, essentially, there's like really no options in Japan. And then Rising comes along. He fights Kai. He gets kind of obliterated.
Right.
And it looks like he's done. And then, all of a sudden, now he's the tournament champion.
Right. But I heard on the first fight against Kai, Ougikubo sort of ignored the cornerman's direction, period.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he just went.
He kind of played right into Kai's hand, which was get hit really hard, really fast.
Right. So exactly, I think so. He at least his cornerman or coach knew that wasn't the real Ougikubo.
Yeah.
So they probably felt. I mean, I'm only guessing, but this is almost like they're approaching at their first encounter. That the last one didn't count.
Well, I mean, and speaking of his injuries, I mean, and in other injuries, it sounds like Kai Asakura broke his hand in his opening fight with Takizawa.
Yes, let's talk about that. Actually, also Takizawa broke his jaw too, I think, from Kai's left hook and everything. So everybody.
I haven't. Now that you say that, I have an image of where that happened. I think I know what punch did that because Kai landed an absolutely giant punch on him that I think might have temporarily dropped him.
Right.
But I want to give, a little credit to Takizawa in that he was hesitant in the beginning, but when it became clear he was losing, he went right at Kai.
Yeah.
And I have more respect for him now that I know that he had a broken jaw when he was doing that.
Right.
But Kai seems to have a clear hand problem. He's broken his hand at least 3 times.
He probably threw like 5 or 6 right hand on the entire 3 rounds, I think.
And he broke it, which makes me think it was probably the punch that broke the jaw. But this means he's now broken his hand at least 3 times that I know of. And on a somewhat funny note, I know someone that works at the doctor's office that fixed his hand. And it's the same doctor that fixed Naoki and Ougikubo's hands. And the joke is that the nurse was joking that the doctor's an Ougikubo fan, so she thinks he might have sabotaged Kai's hand going into the tournament.
What? Anyone in this business or sports knows that the fist injury like
Oh, yeah.
it's a high possibility to get to re-injured first of all,
Right.
within 3-4 months. So in terms of full full recovery, you kind of look at about 6 months, sometimes even up to a year.
Yeah.
So
Well,
for
especially,
Kai, right? I mean,
he broke it in the first round of the tournament, right?
right. So for
So, I
Kai,
mean,
this
his hands never had time to heal. He just keeps breaking it over and over
exactly
again.
right. So I feel bad for him. But this is the point I have to make. I think you said this on the other podcast that Kai should take Takizawa down and do
Yes.
ground and pound, and not take a chance on swinging, striking, because there's a possibility for injuries, right? Because you have to fight
Right.
twice in one day. I
Well, not
totally.
just that. I mean, also, striking was Takizawa's only chance to win that fight.
Oh, I know exactly right. And
Mhm.
all of the past 7 losses Takizawa took, he got taken down and got controlled.
Right.
And it's not like like Takizawa. I mean, Akai is so used to fight a fighter who uses a lot of kicks.
Right.
And again, right here, I don't know why Takizawa didn't use more variety of kicks, frontal kicks, and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, to go back to Kai, so this is what I think. Of course, he has a very good hands, right? Strong hand. If you connect, you can drop anybody. But if he really, really wants to fight in a world class level, that's a good weapon, but that's not enough, right? Because all these guys out there has the same kind of weapon. And I think
Well,
in that sense, his takedown defense is super good, right? I mean,
yes.
so I thought that his whole game plan should have been created around takedown defense. You know what
Kind
I
of like
mean?
a
Like,
Chuck Liddell or Mirko Krokop kind of style.
yeah, exactly. Not going for a knockout to impress fans or excite the fans or whatever. Like he kept saying, like, I want to carry the MMA on Japanese MMA on my shoulder and I want
Yeah.
to excite the fans and blah blah. It's great. It's awesome thing to say, and it's but sometimes that doesn't work, right? I mean, it's just not the probability right. It's just not the smart decision.
Well, my criticism, I agree with everything you said. And I have more criticism for Kai is that I can't put up these losses to his hand injury because his loss to Ougikubo, he seemed super hesitant.
Mm-hmm.
And Ougikubo, who's significantly shorter than him, was repeatedly hitting him in the face.
Right. Yeah, that's actually
And
that happened against Yamaniha fight too.
right.
Right.
And I think everyone now, since the Kyoji fight, was like, well, I'm going to try to hit Kai with a bunch of low kicks too.
Right.
And he was eating a lot of low kicks, and
Uh-huh.
I didn't see any growth. And when you're a striker fighting a wrestler, I feel like you shouldn't be taking that many hits. I
That
mean, the
too.
crowd was gasping every time Ougikubo
Right.
landed one of those looping hooks.
Uh-huh. Well, here's what I think. I mean, I think there's two ways to look at that fight. I mean, one way to look at it is like one. I think Kai never gave up, right?
Right.
Not even once, all the way to 3 rounds. I think he has the fighting spirits. There's no problem about that department. He's got that mind of a fighter, that what it takes to win any fights. Now, two, he was pretty good on takedown defense. Even though he got
Right.
pushed to the corner, even though he got taken down, he knew how to get up and blah blah blah. So in that sense, I think he proved it that he's very
Right.
good at that department. But other way to look at that fight, it was the Ougikubo again was landing a lot of right punches, but in terms of wrestling aspect, he was quite easily went for that single leg. How many
Yeah.
times he picked up that single leg? Like
Right.
almost every time he went in, it was easy. He easily picked up that single leg. I
And I
mean,
only saw Kai. I think Kai was trying to counter it with an uppercut,
mhm,
and I only saw him throw it a couple times.
exactly.
I think he was so nervous about getting taken down that his offense shut down completely.
Completely. That's because also besides if you take right hand out of his game plan, he's not going to be able to do too much with that jab, right? Because he's not
Right.
that. Then what's his other way to finish the fight? So that's when I don't want Asakura fans to accuse me of saying this, but in a way he's one-sided, right? So you have to be an all-round fighter.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
And plus, I would be critical too. I mean, I just don't know how good of training he gets at Triforce in the current situation that he's in.
I agree with you that. Yeah, I have to. I really shouldn't say that because I don't know, but I don't think he is getting a training that he deserves. Maybe I think he deserves to get a better world class training. You know,
Right.
he's got that talent. So yeah, but he really needs to solve that problem, because if you Ougikubo's shorter than him, and he's getting hit
Right.
with a guy who's shorter, and the guy, of course, Ougikubo is the first-rate fighter, but still, he's pretty easily. He was easily picking up his right leg or left leg, whatever. I mean, easy.
So what do you think about it's like this is what Asakura's third New Year's Eve loss in a row, right?
Oh, I know. I feel bad.
And I just think that he should no longer agree to fight on events that his brother is on, because they haven't won on the card since like a long time ago.
However, I'm telling these two guys feel that they need to carry the Japanese MMA on their shoulder. Like I said, this is a Super Bowl of MMA. So there's just no choice for them to not fight unless they're injured.
Well, we'll talk about it later at the Mikuru fight, but yeah, I think Rizin had no choice but to put Mikuru on the card.
Yeah, of course, because much popular. Let's talk about Mikuru fight, because I want to discuss this one, because I have a feeling they might even do a featherweight Grand Prix now. Who knows, right? But
yes.
What do you thought about the Mikuru against Saito?
Outside of the technical aspects of the fight and the fight itself, the feeling I got in the arena is Mikuru is now clearly the biggest star in Rizin.
Oh yeah, of course, right? Yeah.
The crowd went nuts for Mikuru. And when Mikuru was fighting, there was even like a Mikuru chant that was going on. And from other fights, like it was like you could hear a pin drop. It was the typical Japanese, very quiet audience. And when Mikuru fought, they just went nuts. They love him. And when Kai fought, he was getting cheers, but Ougikubo was getting just as loud of cheers. But Mikuru was just a different level than anyone else that fought on the card.
So he's a real, true superstar right now.
Oh, I mean, he's so famous now that the people he fought on the Abima series were there at the fights, and people were taking pictures of them. There are giant lines of people wanting to take pictures with the people that Mikuru beat up on TV.
Right, so Mikuru makes everybody gets involved with him as a star too.
Yes, exactly. He's so famous now that people want to take pictures with like the people that film his YouTube channel.
Right, so it's almost like, I don't know if it's a good analogy, but it's almost like a Ric Flair then, because every pro wrestler wants to be in the same show as a Ric Flair, right?
Right.
Wants to get that same attention, or even fight Ric Flair so they get that spotlight kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. So it seems also if you fight with Mikuru, he tends to Kai and him seem to become friendly with people they fight sometimes, and those people come on their YouTube channels. Like the classic example is Shoji. And so there's a lot of benefits to fighting them, even if you lose. But the fight itself, I thought the opening round was very close. I thought Mikuru was getting hit by lead left hooks by Saito when he came in.
Yep.
And I thought they were both kind of cautious of each other up until Mikuru blasted him in the second round. And at first, everyone thought that the cut was reopened from the Ushiki fight. But then it became clear that Saito's nose must have just been completely shattered.
I think he was knocked down. Almost knocked down with the left hook, was it?
I think he got hurt. It was like a combination that put him down. And it busted his nose up pretty bad. So I think he probably had a hard time breathing afterwards. And then from that point on, it became clear that Mikuru was winning the fight. Which I think after the fight, Sakakibara even said that he thought that maybe Saito took the fight too soon after the Ushiki fight.
Of course, that's probably one of the reasons. Yeah.
But this is also the outcome that Rizin must have wanted, because Mikuru is such a giant star. Now he's beat Saito, and now you can do the tournament and put Mikuru in it, coming off of a couple of wins.
Well, I'm not taking anything away from Saito, but I always thought the Saito is a bit small for featherweight. And in terms of his takedown defense and the grappling thing, he's good, but it's not the best of the best. I could see Kleber, Koike beating him, right? And he got dominated by
is he just like one of those? Is he like one of those classic all-rounders that has the problem that he's not super good at anything? And so he doesn't have an area where he sticks out.
All around, Right. He doesn't have nothing that's. He's just really good all around. You know what I mean?
Right, but he's not an
And
expert at anything, which is when he fights a guy that
no,
isn't expert in something, he has a hard time.
exactly. Right. And in terms of striking, it's obviously Mikuru is better, right? So if you have a trouble,
Right, but I will say I was impressed with Saito's striking in his last fight
mm,
with Uchiku up until the
um,
end.
right?
And he was hitting. Mikuru was getting hit with these lead hooks. And I think there was actually a moment in the fight where they both kind of stunned each other. Like one stunned one, and the other stunned him quickly
Right,
after.
right. I remember
And I
that.
think
Right. They both kind of smile,
they were both
right?
kind of hesitant. I think they were both kind of scared of each other for large portions of the fight.
Well, they're very, very cautious. You know.
Yes, exactly. I mean,
Right.
I can't
So
even imagine the pressure that Mikuru feels fighting on the biggest night of the year on live
oh
TV.
yeah, of course. And
Hmm.
if he loses this one, people will say, "Oh, he lost 2 in a row." You know,
Yeah.
now he doesn't deserve it, blah blah blah. But now he won, so now he even have a right to ask for a title fight against Kleber Koike, right, or something
Exactly.
like that. And if he wins and he became a rising champion, then I think him having a what is it 2 million YouTube followers and being very famous publicly, everything became a pretty good negotiation, like
Yeah.
tactics weapon for him. So he might even make it to UFC. Who knows, right?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I wouldn't want to see that. I would continue. I would like to see him reign and rising because I think like his brother, they have holes to their games
Hmm.
that would just get exploited. I think by extremely top level wrestlers or something like that.
Yeah, I have to say I agree with you. If I said that in Japanese, I'll probably get slammed by social media again. But I have to agree with you on that. And
Mhm.
also, this is I have to say this. I can't reveal so much, but I pretty much can guess what kind of money Mikuru is making
Mhm.
in the Japanese market, not only with the YouTube, sponsorship to purse to the Abema thing and stuff like that. It would be stupid for him to go to UFC.
That's why I agree. I mean,
I need to tell you,
because
it really is.
I mean, I don't know how wisely he spends his money,
Uh-huh.
but just looking at how he spends his money,
Hmm.
he must be making a fortune.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Mhm.
And
For the people that work on his YouTube channel to be living in $10,000 a month apartments means he
well,
must be making an absolute gold mine.
right. And you have to really think of it this way. Like, if this is the States, right? If you do pay-per-view shows, broadcaster takes 50 and promoter takes 50, right? So fighters will take some percentage of that 50 most of the time, right?
Mhm.
And Mikuru's the reality show, whatever that with Abema, it's about the Mikuru, so he is that 50, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's see how much that pay-per-view sold for, like 3,000 yen, whatever.
Mhm.
And let's just do the simple math. Like, let's guess how much it was sold. You know what I mean? Like, if he makes 50% of that, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now that it would be stupid for me to go to UFC in every
Yeah.
business sense of the word. I mean,
If I was him,
unless they
if
offer Fado kind of money.
well, he should just. I mean, he's such a figure in the Japanese market. To go
Mhm.
fight somewhere else would just undercut all of his marketing appeal almost.
Right. That's why, in a way, he's very clever that sometimes he mentions UFC, but it's just his marketing tactic, you know?
Yeah. I mean, if I was him, I would almost want to become the face of the landmark shows
Yeah,
and
exactly.
try
Right.
to negotiate to get a percentage of the pay-per-view buys if he hasn't already done that.
I hope him and his manager or whatever that's smart enough that he already did that, because
Yeah.
he's actually, here's what I think, there's two guys I can think of the guy who never really, really went to the UFC route, which is Shin Aoki, right?
Right.
He always never really.
Very smart for doing it, by the way. He's extended his career so long by
Very
not
long,
going to the
right?
UFC.
Exactly, and doing very well. One, but at the same time, he's very active on social network,
Mhm.
or the Note or Voicey or whatever pro wrestling. Like,
Mhm.
he's very, very good, and he's like doing everything he can as a fighter. But the Mikuru is different. He's actually a talent. You know what I mean? Like a
Right.
businessman. So his whole approach is another level, which is
Right.
making him millions of dollars, which I am assuming.
I
So
I remember because some people were trying to interview them from a foreign media outlet, and they're such business people like Miku and Kai. If you're not a big media outlet, they won't do an interview for free. They're like, why would I do that? I'm going to bring some clicks to your website. You get all the benefit from this. You got to pay me. So I think they're very business savvy.
I mean, that makes every sense, and I'm very happy for him that he established that kind of value to himself.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah, I totally, and especially he is on that world, meaning YouTube's and social networks. Click. He is the big clickbait, right? So called.
And all credit to him. He is the reason fighters make YouTube channels in Japan. Because he was the first, and he was so successful at it. People are trying to copy him.
Right. People try to all copy him, but none of them are really making a big money.
No. Well, it's kind of interesting. If you watch his YouTube versus their YouTube, his YouTube's very different than theirs. Like, he's done a very good job of branding himself on his YouTube channels.
Yeah, it's like a variety show.
Right.
I don't know if you're familiar with that. There's a show called London Hearts. Which was very big, like a same kind of variety show back in like 90s and early 20s. It reminds me of that show. So he's doing this almost very similar thing as
Yeah.
That show, but he's smart, right? It's different.
He also uses it to like brand himself as like this super high fight IQ, kind of badass, the rough past.
Exactly, coming off from the street. So he's a hero of working class too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and also remember in Japan or anywhere in the world, there's always a mafia, yakuza, whatever. Everybody's attracted to that kind of world too,
Right.
So he have experienced the both sides. He's like in a way like Michael Corleone being successful in the Vegas hotels,
Yes,
exactly. That kind of stuff. Like, almost something like that. So I'm telling you, I mean, he's the new figure. It's making a big difference in Japanese MMA, and also because of him, now I think in a way that another fighters outside of Japan, once pandemic problem is all over, they might be making good money fighting Mikuru too. You know what I mean? Like getting involved in that, hype train.
100%. I mean, he's got to be getting attention, and also like going into this year, it was kind of like who's the biggest fighter in Rising? Is it Tenshin? Is it Kai? Is it Mikuru? And now, to me, in my opinion, it's clearly Mikuru.
Right now,
clearly,
right?
Like he got
Horiguchi. Horiguchi is also keeping that.
Exactly. Horiguchi
competitive aspect.
Horiguchi is popular for the fact that he went to the United States and won and did well. Like he's seen as like the best fighter. But I think they kind of have they have overlapping fan bit groups. But I think Mikuru has a different fan group.
Right. In history of Japanese MMA. Well, maybe except Sakuraba, but that's a different era, so let's not talk about that,
Exactly. But I'm also just thinking, like Mikuru has people were mentioning on Twitter, and I was kind of thinking about it, never thought about it before. Tenshin's career has kind of been wasted in Rising a little bit.
A little bit,
Especially with like fights like this Gomi fight, and then his last the Tokoro boxing match.
3 guys exhibition,
But my response to those types of comments would be that while he may not be a fighting top competition, Tenshin's name value has skyrocketed since he's been on Rising.
Exactly. Actually,
especially with the Mayweather fight. So his branding to help out his career professionally, being on Rising, was the biggest thing he ever did.
Oh, I mean, I agree, because like when the very first fight, they gave him an MMA fight offer. They didn't really take him that seriously. I mean, I wouldn't say that seriously, but they were still testing him back then, right?
In my opinion, there's no way this Takeru fight would happen if he had never gone to Rizin.
Oh, exactly. And it's only been 5 years since then. He's one of the biggest names in Japanese household,
Right.
Right. So, I mean, you have to recognize Sakugiba as one of the, best promoters in the business or creating stars, There's no doubt about it.
I will say one of the nice things about the event too, related to Tenshin, was they had a couple surprises lined up, and when Takeru came out to the ring, the crowd went nuts. They're like in disbelief. Right. It was like the idea that Tenshin and Takeru fighting was a dream, and then when Takeru came out to the ring, it became real, and everyone didn't believe they would ever see Takeru in a Rising ring, and people went absolutely nuts about it.
I mean, again, that's such a great move by Sakakibara to confirm that fight on Christmas Eve, right? So it's like
Oh, right.
put more like momentum into this event.
It's on national TV. Talk about free advertising. You're already on TV. You already got everyone watching, and now you're announcing the biggest kickboxing match since Masato was around, and people are eating it up. They're going to go absolutely nuts for it.
Oh, and I'm telling you right now, it's going to be a neutral promotion or whatever that is. I don't care where they're going to be doing this or what promotion's name, whatever. This is going to be sell out pretty quick.
It would be a waste if it was anything but the Tokyo Dome, and I think they could.
Well, I think they're looking at the National Stadium too, in a place they did Dynamite. You know, the Gala against Bob Sapp. You know, Cropot Cup against Sakuraba. You know,
I mean, that the Bob Sapp Akebono.
Sapp Akebono was, I think, no. I think National Stadium was like Sapp and Nogueira.
Okay. Because I wanted to. I thought that'd be a good segue because I read an article. I spent all today and yesterday trying to find the ratings, and they were just released yesterday. But while I was searching for that, I actually came across a Yahoo Japan article. it was on Yahoo Japan, but I think it was from the magazine Number. And a guy was talking about the history of TV ratings, and apparently the highest rated MMA fight ever was Akebono versus Bob Sapp.
Yeah, that beat the red and white singing contest.
And I was completely blown away. That fight did over 30%.
Right.
It was like an absolute giant number. Like
it's a huge number. It's the only time that beat the singing festival by NHK.
Right. So now it all makes sense. When I had to sit through and suffer through Bob Sapp Akebono 2, I now know why that fight was made.
Right.
Because the first fight was insanely watched.
It's the Money in the Bank card. Yeah, for the national television. So that's another one. Money in the Bank is this one, Tenshin versus Takeru.
But that 30% is such an because I mean, we can talk about it now. I think Rising averaged something around 7% for this event,
which was same as last year, pretty much.
Same as last year. And I know going into the event, Sakakibara said his goal was to get like over 10%. And I think they were saying, well, this year, the popular show Warate Ikenai, which is like the Don't Laugh comedy show people probably see on YouTube, isn't going to be aired. That show didn't happen this year.
So there's no big competitor.
So they were thinking,
are gone. Yeah.
All there is Kohaku, the singing competition, and I think another boxing match was made last minute.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
But I think they were thinking they could take advantage of it, and that just wasn't the case. I mean, I don't think people were watching Warate Ikenai instead of Rising. It's what I think Sakakibara was hoping. I think the people that were watching Rising were already watching Rising.
Right. And plus the one who was watching Warate Ikenai will come to the Rising, right?
Yeah, I think they just went to go watch the singing competition instead.
I think so, right. So it's like a different taste anyway. So it's to begin with, they're just not into the fights, period.
Now, you have more inside information. What type of numbers does Fuji TV expect from Rizin?
I actually don't know that, but they were hoping more than 10. But I think
I've always thought on New Year's Eve shows they always wanted something over 10.
Right, they always want to, but I think 6 or 7 is actually acceptable, acceptable numbers. So I think I'm assuming that Fuji Television is committed to do Rising one more year at least,
And but I mean, I can't see why not. Plus, I mean, Kohaku is such a juggernaut at this point.
It is. Right.
Even though the ratings have gone down slightly, the ratings are still close to 40% every year.
Right, and also you have to understand the Japanese is heavily like elderly, like the population is heavy, like half of the populations are over like 60 years old, right? And
I'm happy that you mentioned that because the article I read actually mentioned that the TV ratings also suggest that more people are going out on New Year's Eve. Whereas historically, people would go to like their parents' house and watch all these TV shows and eat a bunch of food and drink. It seems like younger people might not be watching TV on New Year's Eve as much.
Not at all, because they could go to the bar, restaurant, and watch it on their tablet or cell phone.
Yes. So now it seems like even with a population that's already older leaning, now you're removing the younger population that does exist.
Exactly.
The only people are watching are the older people.
Right. And I wouldn't say majority, but the big chunk of older people would just prefer to not watch any violence.
Yeah.
Why do you want to watch somebody getting bloody on New Year's Eve? Is how they feel, you know?
Well, also, I mean, you can talk about MMA being a tradition on TV, but Kohawk has been on TV since the 1960s.
Right. It's a tradition, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Right. So, but anyway, so let's talk about another fight on Rizin 33, which to me was one of the biggest one. Surprise was Izawa dominating
In my
Hamasaki.
opinion, this is the biggest takeaway of the event.
Oh, big
was the biggest news of the event. I mean, after this fight, I was walking around and you could hear people talking about it. They were so stunned because while not everyone is a fan of women's MMA, they'd all become used to the fact that Hamasaki was this dominant champion.
Oh yeah, she was
just crushed everybody.
Everybody, yeah.
And Izawa went out there and absolutely dominated Hamasaki in a way that's never happened before. Hamasaki has never been dominated, except maybe Claudia Gadelha fight. Maybe she was roughed up, but even then, it wasn't a domination. In my opinion,
that was a 115-pound fight. But just for the record, also against Souza, she got knocked out. But I'm telling you, publicly that she had a back injury. She threw her back a couple of days before the fight. We thought about scratching that fight, but she didn't want it to. So she basically walked in there without really being able to do anything.
Well, also, I wouldn't consider that a domination because that was just she just got knocked out.
Right, yeah.
Whereas this was the only time I've ever seen someone be like, oh, Ayaka Hamasaki is one of the best grapplers in MMA. I'm going to show that she's not to my level of grappling. Because
exactly, right.
Izawa completely destroyed her in every aspect of grappling.
Every aspect. Hamasaki has zero answer for Izawa on the ground.
And I think Hamasaki might have to blame her teammate, Saori Oshima, but a clear part of Izawa's game plan was that when Hamasaki's on top of people, she tends to posture up and throw punches down.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to up kick her in the face repeatedly every time she does that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the post-fight comments, Hamasaki even said those kicks really messed her up and they stunned her a lot. And that might have been why she was so kind of out of it in the second round. And Hamasaki has a history of getting caught in triangles. Yeah. She's never been submitted by them, but she gets caught in them. I guess Izawa used it to get on top of her.
Right? I remember that, yeah.
Yeah.
No, here's what it is. I mean, I think Hamasaki was confident enough to be able to grapple with her. That's why she did allow, right, Izawa to come in close. Almost didn't really think about doing the striking game, you know. But I think the fact, remember how like Izawa got on her back pretty quickly, and how Hamasaki had a real trouble getting the arm locks in. Mm-hmm. That's when I knew, oh, she's in trouble. You know.
I thought, first off, let's talk about Izawa is a graduate student at a very prestigious Japanese university. She's a very smart person.
Mm-hmm.
And when I interviewed her, one of the things I asked, like, what's your response? People are talking about, this is before the fight, but how quickly you've risen to the top of the MMA world. And she said, it's more of that she's done a really good job, in her opinion, of coming up with game plans and using what she's good at while also working and make her weaknesses stronger. And in this fight, it was clear. I mean, before the fight, my prediction was Hamasaki has a clear striking advantage.
Exactly, right.
And Hamasaki's physically a stronger fighter. Just look at their body types. Hamasaki's stronger. So Hamasaki is going to try, if they strike, Hamasaki can win. And Izawa was just like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get this fight to the ground. I'm going to pull guard. I'm going to go for takedowns. I'm going to jump on a guillotine choke. And I don't care if I get it or not. As long as we're grappling on the ground, I feel that I have the advantage. And she proved she was right.
She was right. She was right. She took that striking game out of the window the way she fought. I mean, if she struck, that's a different game, you know? Hamasaki is clearly still better striker. And I think even physically, maybe Hamasaki is stronger, but Izawa has a longer leg and arm. Mm-hmm. So even though she doesn't necessarily have the big muscle, you know, it could get very difficult. It has a leverage on the ground game. So, and on top of that, she's a wrestler / judoka. I mean, come on, right? I mean,
don't forget the sumo. She also did sumo.
Yeah, right. So, You cannot
But I
be
mean,
taken down by her. That's the point, right? I mean,
before this fight, I was impressed by Izawa. Two things that impressed me about Izawa was I watched her at a Deep Jewels event, at a deep event, or
mhm,
I think it was a deep event.
mhm,
She had a grappling match with Megumi Sugimoto,
mhm.
who is one of Ayaka Hamasaki's teammates,
Right.
who was a somewhat high-level collegiate wrestler. She
Yeah.
wasn't like Olympic level or anything, but
Yeah.
she was a
She got smoked. Right. I know.
yeah. And Izawa absolutely smoked her. But what impressed me was before the fight, you could hear Izawa warming up for the grappling match
Mm-hmm.
for like 40 minutes. She was just backstage, just constantly working. And you looked at her and she just didn't stop moving. And she was working out in the hallway and just doing all this stuff. And you're just like, oh, this girl's got stamina that doesn't stop. This girl is a cardio machine. And then you watched her grapple and she's so quick on every submission. You're just like, oh, okay. And then you see another grappling tournament and she beat a girl with a heel hook, an arm bar, and a choke. And you're like, okay, Ayaka Hamasaki beats people with arm bars. Seika Izawa just beat 3 different people in under a minute with 3 different submissions. So it's like, oh, this girl knows how to grapple. And the other thing that impressed me the most, this is what impressed me the most, was that she fought Miki Matono in her second, I think it was her second professional fight.
And beat her.
And beat her. Now, it was a competitive fight, and she beat her. But then she fought her again, not that long ago, like several months later, and absolutely destroyed her.
Yeah, destroyed her. Yeah, I know.
And you're just like, the giant gaps and improvement that she's making between each fight is incredibly impressive. And if I was Ayaka Hamasaki, I'd be concerned about the rematch if she keeps improving at the same rate.
Well, they would have to do a rematch. I know that.
Well, Ayaka Hamasaki even said in her post-fight interview that she's like asked about her future. She says, "Well, I have a duty to fight Izawa again, and I've already been starting to hear rumors that the fight's already booked for some time next year." And you got to think that if they fight again, Hamasaki's going to try to make it a striking battle.
Well, she has to, right? But let's see, and well, here's what it is. I mean, I know you just explained everything about Izawa, and I agree with you. She's like one of the top talents came out of Japanese women's MMA, but the fact that strawweight in the Japanese women's MMA is almost like 0. Well, there's nothing going on, right? So I wasn't too sure how good she is. Now, when she beat Hamasaki, I'm firmly confirmed that convinced. I'm not convinced that she should start building up in the 115. I mean, she really. I mean, I don't know why. Forget this atom weight, whatever that is. No, she should build up to 150. She has the Deep Jewels title at 115, and if she beats Hamasaki 110, she should grab a microphone and say, "Forget this 110. That's not the weight class I want. Let's do 115." And ask Rizin to book top 115 fighters.
Well, I know you you said it would never happen because of the way things work, but I mean, she said in interviews that she wants to be a UFC champion. She's very clear. She wants to become a world champion. And my thought process is, I mean, she's already done everything she can in Rising in one fight. This is what happens when Rising books somebody in an immediate fight with the title holder. When you dominate them, she has nowhere farther up to go. She's proven she's the best in Japan in one fight.
Right, but if she wins it, there's a championship clause, and of course, not just because of the contract, the way the Japanese MMA works, they gave her an opportunity, so she has to kind of pay back a couple more times. So my guess
Plus, with the pandemic, it makes sense to just stay active in Japan.
Right, but if she beats Hamasaki again in a title fight and gets the belt, maybe she would have to defend title one more time or twice. Then she could go.
And back to your earlier point about the strawweight division, I mean, I just don't think there's any chance because the other Miki Matono is a very good fighter that she beat, and she's Ayaka Hamasaki. She was in Ayaka Hamasaki's corner. She's one of Ayaka Hamasaki's main sparring partners, and is often described as being like a little model of Ayaka Hamasaki. They're very similar fight styles, and she was strawweight. And Sayaki said, and after her last fight, you can't fight at strawweight. You should really drop down. There's no one in strawweight in Japan.
Right, exactly. And
her next fight,
right.
Her next fight's been booked for March, and it's at 49 kilo.
Right, I know.
So, yeah.
I mean,
Their strawweight division just isn't going to happen. I feel like.
Oh, I know that, and I actually just communicated with Saiki a few hours ago. I know that she had no trouble making 115, so they feel that it only makes sense for her to cut a little bit of weight because she will have an advantage there. I get that, but there's no 110 in anywhere in the world, and even at 110, like you said, the Rising have trouble booking anybody to go fight against her, especially at 110. I mean, 105 girl won't fight her at 110. 115, why would I go down to 110, right, to fight her? Sooner or later, they're going to face trouble trying to book in somebody to fight her.
Well, to your point, if you're a big enough fighter, you can do whatever you want. I mean, Rena's fought at 50 kilo for her last couple fights.
Sure, right.
And no one seems to care about that at all.
Exactly, right. In Japan, nobody cares in a way, right, about the weight once you became famous enough. So that's why I think you should be building up,
Yeah, so I know Izawa's brother is a personal trainer. And when I spoke to her, she said she's working on bulking up. Okay, the only reason she fought at 49 kilo is because she walks around at like 53 kilo.
And I'm telling you right now, I'm going to tell this. I guess her coach or people in Japan might get pissed, but she should train in States. She does not have a good sparring partner, women partner in Japan at that weight class at all.
Yeah, because I think she's technically free, but she realistically trains at K-Clan, and she trains with King Reina, Kate Lotus, and I think she also trains with Kana Watanabe and Hikaru Aono. And that's just not, I mean, Kana Watanabe is a very good fighter, but she's just too big for a training partner, I think.
Yeah, exactly, right.
And Hikaru Aono is a very good wrestler, but she's not world class at this point.
And so the point is
she would benefit a lot. Yeah,
exactly. This is what I think. I mean, for those who doesn't realize this, is this, like, even though, let's say, you're surrounded by 115 pounds fighters, it's also much better to have a different body types and different a fight style of fighters. You know what I mean? Like, you do not have that kind of variety in Japan, even for a Japanese male fighters. Like, for example, like, to go back to Naoki Inoue, because you mentioned what's his plan for the future. Like, one of the problems we knew that Naoki have in Japan is a lack of grappling training and a lack of a variety of sparring partners at the same or similar weight classes. Now, for example, he didn't have anybody to spar with the same body type as Ougikubo, which is short, stocky. You know what I mean? Right. She was sparring with Seki, which is a little bit lanky, long. Now, when Seki gets on the top of him, he had an easy time squeezing his legs between the body. He was able to train that pretty easily, but no, not against Ougikubo. Didn't have that kind of training partner to do that. So all these little things count, right? So in that sense, she's not going to have a good training partner in Japan. It's just a fact. And if she really think about the world class, like a competition, if she wants to be a UFC fighter, she should go like now to join something.
To build on your point, I went to AACC had their 20th anniversary recently, and I got the chance to kind of go to their party and talk to some of the people. And I was talking to Abe because AACC is a very famous women's team, and I was like, "What do you think? Why do you think your team's so strong?" And he said, one of his philosophies was that he wrestled in college.
Right, he was a wrestler.
He always thought that the women wrestlers did better when they trained with other women. Because he thought that when they trained with men, sometimes the men would either take it easy, or there was like this awkwardness, or the body types were different.
Exactly.
And benefited.
Right. I totally agree. Right. Yeah, exactly.
And so if you don't have access to a bunch of different female sparring partners, I think you have to go find them.
Exactly, right. And it's hard in Japan. It's difficult.
Because Mizuki has kind of that, when she's in New York, she has that situation where all those girls from different gyms train together, right?
Right. Caitlin, Erin, everybody,
Yeah, I think Claudia was also involved. So
Claudia, right. Jessica, it's saying, like, that's what the Izawa needs. And a lot of people might think, oh, she's only, 23, 4, whatever. She's already 24. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's how you have to realize that. So I'm telling you right now that she should come to the States to train. Like Ren Hiramoto, he's going to move permanently to the States this year. And just to go back to Naoki, I'm bringing him back at the end of January to join the last half of Aljamain Sterling's the fight camp because he has a title fight coming up, which is not announced yet, right? Obviously, so I can't talk about that. But he's doing the fight camp, and then so in Horiguchi's in ATT, there are more than few teams that is, I believe, it's suitable for Izawa in states. So she should really start looking into that. I really think.
Okay, we got a comment from Juan saying, "What gym would you like to see? What gym do you think she should go to?"
I'm not going to mention this on public space because I'm going to suggest that to Saiki later tonight.
All right.
So we'll see.
So we'll have to wait and see. But
yeah.
I will say, I think to your comment about ATT or Rufus Sport, Juan, I think a lot of people in Japan are obsessed with ATT because of Horiguchi's success. But I don't think ATT is the best environment for everybody.
Oh, totally agree. Right.
And so I think people in Japan, whenever they think about training abroad, they're like, oh, you got to go to ATT with Mike Brown. But I think there's a lot of good options for her. And it just depends on where she fits and where she can get the good sparring partners.
Right, exactly. And the coach that could like enhance the skill that she already have, and also the skills she needs. You know what I mean?
So what does she need? She needs to work on her striking.
Well, that too, of course. The way she fight, she's utilized. She could be like a guy like Damian Maia or Hani Yahya, who basically only uses striking to get to the ground. You know what I mean?
I thought that's what was so smart about her strategy was
exactly right. That's
I know that she
in
her last fight with Siwoo Park, she was like, I wanted to showcase some of my striking. Right. And I've always respected fighters that are like, no, I'm going to use what got me to the party. I'm a grappler. That's where my clear advantage is. That's what I'm going to do.
Well, but against that last fight, I think she was confident enough to be able to strike against her, right? But not against Hamasaki. So why take chance? So that shows you that she has a good fight IQ. She doesn't get too hot and forgets about the game plan or rush. You know what I mean? She was pretty good at calm looking, you know.
Also, I mean, talk about not being phased at all by the big stage.
Oh, I know.
I was also impressed by that. But I could gush about her all day. We could move on to another fight, maybe.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I mean, we're talking a lot already. It's already past hour and 17. So maybe we can talk about the other fight at the other time because it's already, we covered pretty much all the good ones, right?
Let's just close with this. Any other big fights that stood out to you?
Oh, Jesus. Besides that, hold on. You know, I'm telling you, honestly, after Naoki lost, I spent most of the time texting and emailing and trying to figure out what he needs to do next. So most of the fights, I guess you would have to say Satoshi against Yachi because it proved once again the Yachi, I mean, the Satoshi is just really good at the world-class level. And I was genuinely surprised that Shirek Sekine won.
That made, I don't want, that fight was, it reminded me of the UFC's fight in Colorado. I was like, this is the weirdest fight I've ever seen.
Yeah, exactly. The very first UFC fight. And also, I was quite disappointed with Mr. Suzuki, the Kaibutsu-kun against Kyohei Hagiwara. I thought he can do better. You know?
Yeah, and I mean, you've mentioned some good ones. Off the top of my head, I know he lost, but I was incredibly impressed with Beinoa.
Oh, yeah, Beinoa is good. Yeah, right.
And
against Takeda,
he hurt Takeda, who's a champion.
Right.
Not in Rising, of course, but I mean, he's a promotional champion, and Beinoa looked pretty good against him for only his third fight, essentially just being a kickboxer. So I was impressed by that. And I'd also say that I was also noted that Satoshi changed his tune and is now saying he wants to fight in Bellator.
Right. And he wants to be like Horiguchi, right? Like
it's interesting.
That makes sense.
And I guess my closing comment would be, I guess you were right all along. Right all along that Koike changed his management and now he's headlining a card.
Right.
So it must have been management problems.
And but I think the same manager still stays with Satoshi, right? I think that's what it is. So we'll see.
Maybe, but there's something going on because management's changed and now he's headlining.
There's a Koike, right? Satoshi, and there's a Yamaniha, right? There's another man from Bonsai coming from probably making it to the Rizin debut in Shizuoka. It's under our management.
Oh, perfect.
So we'll see. You know, I hope that is going to happen. You know, all right. But before that, let's touch real quickly on this one. I think it's a big news for the Japanese event.
Oh yes.
Kubo no longer supported by One Championship. Remember, One Championship has been their big supporter for the last 3 years. Now,
I couldn't tell by looking at the cage with the One logo that was bigger than the Shooto logo.
Exactly. Now, remember they used to have a supported by One on every posters, everything else. Now, all of a sudden, January, it's no longer supported One by One. So
at all. Fascinating. So does that mean that One has given up on the Japanese market?
I don't think so. I think
or they want to have their own shows.
I think One is still very close with Abema. And I think, as you could see, they're booking a lot of Japanese fighters in the first couple of shows. We have our clients, Okami, fighting in January. And I have actually another Japanese client fighting in February. So they're really...
Ayaka Miura has a title match.
Exactly. So, no, I don't think One gave up on the Japanese market at all. I think Shooto maybe decided that maybe they cannot keep up with what One is trying to do, because obviously they haven't been able to send Shooto champions to One at all, almost, right? Only a handful of it,
So is your thought that Shooto's probably the one that decided to not continue the relationship?
I think so, yeah.
Well, I mean, when you looked at the Abema numbers, I mean, to me, it always looked like Shooto was dominating One Championship on views and on Abema.
On views, right. Yeah.
And it just seemed like Shooto was just making free money from One for having them sponsor their events. But
I think the problem is partly because of pandemic and partly because of Rizin. I think Shooto, of course, cannot force fighters to go to One, right? They got to give fighter a choice. So, I think that was a difficult part of the business. You
also can't avoid the fact that One Championship has a bad reputation. I mean, say what you will, if it's warranted or not, but I've spoken to coaches and they're just like, well, I got a guy in One. And then it's kind of like, you got a guy in One, so we've been having some problems. Like essentially saying, can't fights.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, only a couple of them get fights pretty regularly. But even the guy like Aoki complains publicly, right? That he can't get fights and this and that. So if Aoki having a hard time, I'm guessing the others will,
And also, my question to you, since you might know, is this a move by Shooto because Shooto's now thinking we're revamping VTJ and we'd rather have our champions in a Shooto go and fight on the VTJ stage than the One stage?
You know what? I think Shooto had a lot of support from Abema TV. So I personally don't think VTJ is such a big enough stage, not yet, for them to be like that, especially without Abema's help. So I think Sakamoto doesn't want to take too much risk and maybe go back to old Shooto way, like more emphasizing lots of amateur shows, maybe 6 shows per year to do title fights and blah blah blah. You know?
Because I'll tell you what, I was compiling the results for the year, and Shooto flies under the radar. They still put on a ton of fights at all of their regional shows.
They do, right? And you have to understand, Shooto's amateur shows happens all over the Japan. That's actually
has produced a ton of talent.
Tons of talent. It's a foundation of Japanese MMA, and most of the guys.
I think Ayaka Hamasaki's first fight was for Shooto.
Sure, and most of the people who is involved in those Shooto amateur shows, they're pretty much doing it for free. It's like almost volunteer work out of passion. So for Mr. Sakamoto to be able to organize that kind of a large group of people, it's not that easy. The guy's doing it for the volunteer out of passion. You know what I mean? And everybody has their own idea. So, but hopefully, I don't know what's going to happen with the Shooto now, because let's hope they'll find another sponsor, because in Japanese MMA, I'm telling you right now, because of a landmark and trigger, they're pretty much taking the places of where Pancrase and Deep was, right? And Shooto. So,
as I just said, I was putting together the results of the year, and I mean, it looks like to me, Deep just dominated the regional market scene.
Oh yeah, they did, right.
And Shooto and Pancrase were kind of falling behind a little bit. Now, in Pancrase's defense, Pancrase didn't have as many events because they decided to just not hold events and wait for the pandemic to
Exactly, and they
play
pay
out a
the
little bit.
fighters too, so which is very, very good for the Japanese.
So that skews their results. But Shooto, I mean, was still trying to do stuff, and it just wasn't the same level.
No,
So I'm
and
interested
I
to see what
see,
happens next year. I mean, this
but,
year.
but in the last year, all the shooter shows, I see a lot of empty, seats and stuff. So it's not like
yeah.
they're doing well on the gate. So
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll
And-
see. I hope they find something, And real quickly, and since you mentioned Pancrase, one
Yes.
Pancrase's venue, Studio Coast, closed down
because
and
of the
they found a
pandemic.
new venue, right? New venue in Takada no
Yes.
Baba, which is like a banquet hall, right? So
Right. I'm actually excited about that because as much as I like New Pier Hall, it was like super out of the way
was
and
okay.
hard. It was like on the opposite side of Tokyo to where I live.
Right. Takada no Baba is pretty middle of everywhere, right? It's accessible, right?
And I went to school at Waseda University, which is at Takada no Baba.
Takada no Baba, right?
So
That's
it'll be
where
nice
all
to
the
go back.
ramen shops are there too. Right?
Exactly. And I think the train station plays the theme song to Rocket Man. What's his name?
Yeah, it is Osamu Tezuka.
Yes, exactly.
It's the Astro Boy.
Astro Boy, yes, exactly.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's where the Takada no Baba is taking. That's where the lab is,
Exactly.
Yeah. No, yeah. I love Takada no Baba.
I like Pancrase because they've always found.
Right? Yeah.
Pancrase has always found fun little cool, like not little, but fun cool venues to have their unique environments at. So I'm excited to go check it out.
Right. And I think to the hardcore Japanese MMA fans, to finish this episode, I'm going to give you one little scoop. I think Pancrase will make another announcement to surprise fans.
Oh.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So let's see, right? I'm really looking forward to hear that announcement.
And my only Pancrase announcement would be that I am trying to plan a trip where I'm going to drive to Sendai and interview both Karen and Nori.
Please
to make Team Prava more. I can't even say the name. Team Pravjara talent. They need more content, and I am going out of my way to try to make it.
Yeah, I'm telling you, that Nori girl, she may turn out to be a pretty good one, so she should be training in a better environment. I'm sorry, but
no, that's why I'm going up there. I have so many questions. Like personally, I have so many questions. I'm like, where are you training? Like, what the hell is going on?
I have one big question. How come they're not doing YouTube?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to go up there and just be like, I need to know. I need answers. So I'm trying to get it together. Right now, I'm scrapping together a Saudi Oshima video I did, and making subtitles for a 30-minute long interview is just destroying my soul. So, but then I will be revived by Team Pravjara when I go up to Sendai.
Very interesting. You should even videotape the interviews. And can you videotape?
I want to bring my wife along and just say videotape everything.
Right? Yeah, like and even place they sleep. I would love to see that.
It's so many questions.
Right. So many. Oh my god! And tell me right now, you should. Like I told you, you should pitch this to Netflix.
Like there's this team in Sendai that needs to be. There needs to be a reality show.
It has to. I know. I'm very looking forward to see that.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so let's wrap this up. I got to start eating dinner. My wife is looking at me, so
she's judging you.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's talk again in 2 weeks.
Perfect.
All right. Great. And thank you for everybody for listening to us for almost 90 minutes today.
A happy New Year for everyone listening.
And happy New Year's to everybody listening to our show. Yep. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye. So see you in 2 weeks, Charlie.
Yep. 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.